you know, last week I was in Nashville for the first time ever in my life. It was so amazing. I am so looking forward to going back. City of music, city of lovely people, city of spaciousness. It was like the best things about what I remember loving about Toronto and then also about being here and kind of blended together. And it just felt so good to be there. So anyway, but I was there for a very specific reason, and that was for a 2-day live event, which was the Relaxed Money live event that is part of the year-long program that Glenn and I have been in with Kate Northrup. And that program is called Relaxed Money, and it has basically been about using nervous system resetting techniques and tools, along with mindfulness and then all of the money practices, to have a more relaxed relationship with money, a more intentional relationship with money. And it has been phenomenal, so phenomenal that I've decided I'm going to do it again when it comes up next year because there's just more to dive into. Now, I also knew that I really wanted to be at this 2-day live event because I have been a Kate Northrup fan for probably about 18 years. She is the one person whose mailing list I have never unsubscribed from, and even though I may not read everything, she is just in the atmosphere for me all the time because she is so dialed in to what it is that she does and how it is that she serves in this world. And the way that she speaks, the way that she shows up in the world is completely and fully in alignment with New Thought principles. And so even to the point where, even though we were talking about money and we were talking about aligned spending plans and people were talking about businesses, it all came down to you are the creator of your reality. You are the power. It's not anything external. And the power that you are is love. To be in a room with 200, mostly women, there were maybe like 6 guys there, and this powerhouse in the world that has a rock-solid prosperity consciousness that continues to expand was incredible. And so the name of our 2-day live event was called Overflow, and it was about living in the overflow, living from the overflow. And for me, that was like, yeah, I'm down for that. But what didn't occur to me until I was there was for some people, this word was an activating word. It was a triggering word because for some people it meant too much or flooding. And so there was some talk about, what is overflow versus flooding. And so we ended up going into what it means, how important it is to be resourced. This whole year, we've been talking about the nervous system and how the nervous system is the thing that needs to indicate safety to the body so that we can try new things, we can step out of our comfort zone, we can do all of this expansive stuff that we want to do, and the body knows that it's okay to do so and that it isn't a threat. And so this is what happened with even this topic of overflow versus flooding. And so on the very first day, within the very first couple of hours, I think, there was someone who shared that I had already had a great conversation with, and she offered something that landed in a completely different way for me, and I'm like, oh my God, this is a talk right here. I got to bring this back to the community. So up until a couple of years ago, I don't think I'd ever really tuned into the term resourced. I'm feeling resourced. I'm feeling under-resourced. I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, whatever. I'm under-resourced. I don't have the energy, the time, the capacity, the wherewithal, the bandwidth to do the things I need to do. And in order to feel more resourced, I got to do some stuff. I got to maybe sleep better. I got to eat better food. I got to exercise. I got to do some nervous system regulation. So this term resourced has come up again and again and again and again, especially in this year-long program. And I've heard it and looked at it and written it and talked about it and read it as resourced every single time until this person offered a share in community. This is why I encourage us to share in community. And I heard that word differently for the first time as resourced. Now, maybe someone else here has heard it that way before, but for me, this was huge. Because I'm like, yeah, resourced is great, and I'm following the tools and doing the practices and all that kind of stuff, but why? Why do I need to be resourced and feel resourced? And what is it that happens when I resource myself? I come back into alignment as source, as God, as love. as the infinite potentiality of not just my being, but of being, period. And for me, that was one of my key takeaways from the 2-day event. And there were lots. But that just landed like a spiritual realization for me. And I am so, so grateful and so loved that I was finally ready to hear and have that sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Perspective with that word. So for me, when it comes to resourcing, one of the most effective ways to do it is affirmative prayer. And yesterday we had our very first of 5 classes exploring the practice of prayer, and it was so good. Like the first half of the session was led by Sherry, and then the second half of the session was led by me. And there was such great discussion. There were so many curiosities. There was so much insight, and there was a lot of experience that came out of it as well. And so the title of my talk today is Resourced: Living from the Overflow of Love. And so in this class that we had yesterday, one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to start answering the 3 different questions that were asked in our description of the event. The first one being, what is prayer? The second one, how can it help me? And then the third one, how can it help our world? And so I talked about how I have different experiences of prayer. I grew up with a certain kind of prayer that was basically about asking, about begging. It was conditional on, if I behave this way, then I'm going to get this stuff. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, because if that is something that works for you, great. It didn't work for me. And so when I discovered New Thought at the Center for Spiritual Living Toronto, when I started learning about affirmative prayer, also known as spiritual mind treatment, some people call it practical prayer. Emma Smiley, founder of VTC, called it atomic prayer. For me, this was an actual practical tool that I could use to shift my experience of life, of abundance, of health, my relationships with people, with experiences, just by using this tool. And so for me, the number one way to resource is to practice affirmative prayer. And so we talked yesterday about how prayer is about connection. And even when I used the word connection, I was thinking, connection doesn't really cut it for me, because connection with something. And for me, I am so focused on, and thank you, Dr. James Mellon, for drilling this into my being, on oneness, that I want to be as careful as I can with the words that I use, with the phrases that I use, to be super intentional about this is what I really want to focus on. I want to focus on oneness. And so for me, it is so much more about alignment. It is so much more about embodiment. There's nothing to connect with, because there's nothing that we're separated from. It may feel like it sometimes, but if there's only one, there's only one, right? And so we talked about how we can connect, or how we can come into alignment, how we can resource. We talked about, and this was more from Sherry's perspective, about the guidance that someone can receive through prayer, the kind of prayer that she was offering. And then what I realized was that was the big sort of difference, the big distinction between the 2 types of prayer that we were offering, the 2 types of perspectives on prayer, that Sherry's is very much about guidance, and that our style, New Thought, science of mind, unity, divine science, universal foundations for better living, is about affirmation. It is about saying, this is who and what, there's only one thing going on, this is who and what I am, this is what I know. Thank you. I appreciate so very much that it is done, and now I'm just letting it go and letting it happen the way that it's meant to happen. Not trying to control. I'm no puppet master or anything like that, even though sometimes I am a puppet master. But really, letting it go and just trusting and knowing that the greatest and highest version of whatever it is I'm supposed to experience is happening or is on its way. All right? And so we were also talking about language, and this was such a great discussion. It was more like a philosophy class for a while there, about how language can be so limiting, and language itself can create a barrier or a seeming separation between us and Source, us and the love that we truly are. And so it reminded me, I wrote a book a few years ago that I know some of you have read, But I talked about this because in the very first advanced consciousness studies class with Dr. James Mellon of the Global Truth Center, Los Angeles, the subtitle, and that's not the right word, the adjacent title for our class was There Are No Words, and the other one was Question Everything. And there are no words kept coming up again and again and again because we found it so incredibly challenging and difficult at times. And sometimes we're like, I don't even want to diminish what it is that's being experienced here with words because that is going to limit it because I only know the words I know from my human mind perspective, and yet there's all of these infinite potentialities, these infinite possibilities, these infinite ways of not just describing something, but experiencing and embodying it. And so I went and I read it this morning, and I'm like, yeah, this still works for me. So I want to share it with you guys. I believe words can be limiting. I also believe words can be liberating. I believe endeavoring to explain something as mind-bending and seemingly ineffable as oneness using only words can feel daunting. However, I also believe we should still try. Why? Because when we realize we can't rely on what we have in front of us, we are pushed, inspired, even activated to move beyond the limitations of our current understanding and capability. That inspiration opens us up to stepping out of our comfort zones, which in turn allows us to gain new insights and perspectives on what it is we're trying to understand. These new insights and perspectives are what ignites our imagination and allows us to more fully experience the infinite creativity, resilience, and love we innately are and what we can become. Words may be limiting by nature, but language is continually expanding and evolving out of necessity, as are we. And so if we are to keep transforming, if we are to keep moving beyond our comfort zone that is in place right now, if we are to keep moving beyond the physical experience that we are having right now and really embrace and embody our true nature, which is something that really seems to be ineffable, unexplainable, indescribable, then we need to keep opening up and allowing ourselves to be expanded. But that can feel scary, right? Because moving into the unknown, moving into the new, moving into the something that hasn't yet been experienced, so we have no context for what it's going to feel like, that can be a threat to our nervous system. That can be a threat to our body. And no matter what our conscious intentions and dreams and desires might be, our body and nervous system are going to shut down, and we're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to grow. And that is when the resourcing of nervous system tools comes in, because that's when, I've showed you guys some of these before, that's when we signal safety to the body, that it is okay to feel exactly how we're feeling. It's okay to lean up against the comfort zone, and then it's okay to let that comfort zone soften and then actually move through it so that we can experience a more expanded version of our being. And when we signal safety, ultimately what we're telling is we're telling the body, you're okay, you're not going to die. Okay? And so that is what this entire 2-day event was about. That is what this entire year-long program has been about. And I was just giddy with glee when this resource thing came up, because it was then all about rediscovering, leaning into, and opening up to living from the overflow, and not just of love, as love, right? And so the other thing that we talked about yesterday is that when it comes to affirmative prayer, that you can't just say the words, okay? Like everything is frequency, everything is vibration. There's gotta be feeling behind it. There's gotta be some kind of passion and movement for those words to be carried along. And so Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science and who wrote The Science of Mind, does Reverend Raymond have his big chunky book with him today? No.
I did not bring
Okay, all right. Anyway, some of you are familiar, this big honking book that's about this thick, where really only the first 4 sections that you need to do, or you need to read to know what's in the rest of it. In there, Ernest Holmes says that the key ingredient to effective affirmative prayer is feeling. Without the feeling, there's no juice, there's nothing to ignite it, It's just a bunch of words, just a bunch of ideas, maybe even a little bit of hoping, right? And then at the beginning, at our meditation today, the thing that I thought was really important to share was in an interview many years ago with Unity Magazine, Greg Braden made a statement and said, you don't even need the words. You don't even need the words, especially in the English language, because English is a language of separation. If we go back to, let's say, Aramaic, the language that Jesus originally spoke, there aren't words for you or I. There are no words for outer or inner. There are no words for mind or heart because it's all the same thing. And so then there are different languages that go and start to label and make sense and give context and meaning, and like break things down more and more and more, which just causes more seeming separation, right? So if we bring it all back to forget about the words for a moment and just tune into the feeling, that is what the prayer is itself. Now, the other thing I want to read you is from Rupert Spira. I've talked about him before, and for me right now, he's the person I look to in terms of like, okay, how much more can I expand? What else can I open up to that's different from what I've been learning up until now? And so at the back of The Heart of Prayer, this little book that I absolutely adore, he writes, the belief that we are a separate person, a tiny part of a vast world, leads us to project the idea of God beyond the world at an infinite distance from ourselves. As this person, we enter into a devotional relationship with God. We surrender to God. This is the highest state of the individual, placing it in right relationships to the whole. So again, if that works for you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But then he writes, however, when the individual is divested of all the qualities that it derives from the content of experience, it stands revealed as infinite being, God's being, the only being there is. As such, the individual does not pray, it is dissolved in prayer. So to end, when we practice affirmative prayer, we become more intentional and directional with our thoughts, with our conscious mind. We get clear on who and what we truly are, love. And with that intentionality and clarity, we're led to fulfillment, to more wholly experiencing and expressing as the love we truly are, until eventually, through the resourcing of affirmative prayer, our attention and focus shift from experiencing our beingness, our humanness as expressions of God, to more fully embodying the infinite potentiality of being, aka the overflow of love. Thank you, and so it is.